Hi! So, this is my first video, so sorry if this ends up low quality with the scripts or with my edits, but my edits weren't that high quality anyway, and I will try to be more active on YouTube, especially after I get 2 new subs while being inactive. By the way, hello guys. Let's say you were scrolling to YouTube and you saw some top 10 train games in 2000 and I don't know, and you saw some good train driving games in simulation genre, or you just got recommendation from a random VTuber who plays train simulator. By the way, hello guys. And now you wanna dive into train simulation games. So, you have seen several or similar games, but right now you don't know which one you want to start with, or which train sim game actually suits for you. Well, luckily, you can have your own preferences, like which feature is more important for you, or which one is actually not. We have games where you can play multiplayer without mods, or you can play it as a mod. We have games that has career mode, sandbox mode, real life like driving experience, or kinda like real life experience. And then you have the pick one route, pick one train, and hit play, and you will find yourself inside the train's cab, or even better, you are already on the go. Note that in this video, I will try to focus on my personal favorites, especially the ones I had played with or actually playing with during live, so I think this will make my opinion more authentic, especially because I try to play these games as realistic as possible. Also note that this comparison is focusing on more modern games with one exception, and by my experience, as we go further down in this video, it will include more hardcore or real-life-like experience games, and guess some of you could already guess which title is going to be included in the last section of the video, and which one is going to be the exception, but I'm not spoiling it right now. So, the first title of my suggestions is Direl Wally. If I had to pick a game for beginners in the simulation genre, I couldn't recommend better game, and I can't recommend enough to avoid at the same time, and let me explain why. Direl Wally, which is made by the Serbian Alt Future, offers you a very beginner-friendly experience when it comes about the physics of trains. It has the essentials for proper driving simulation, although it simplifies one or two things like the brakes. Brakes doesn't have reaction time, all the cars or carriages or coaches, you name it, starts braking immediately, no real airflow simulation in the brake pipes, the locomotive fills and empties air in every carriages at the same time. However, the longer train you have, the longer time it takes to get the desired air pressure in the brake pipes. If you don't understand how train brakes work, don't worry, these things are only necessary to know when you play more advanced simulation games. Another nice touch that you can and have to couple trains together in a way that is not even scratched by other titles yet in this video. So the shunting experience is especially outstanding in the game, and also let's not forget that you can buy some gadgets in the shops spread around the map to make your life easier. The career mode, which feels like easy to complete if you played with other simulation games, can make the gameplay fun, and sometimes you have to look for a job that suits your license. You have to get certification for almost everything, like anything other than the DE2 license. But wait, sometimes you have to have a certain license to buy license, so you don't make enough money and then just buy the license for the most powerful locomotive and enjoy the huge performance of the DE6 right after the start. Also, job pay is different. It sometimes feels random how much money you get after completing a job, but usually require licenses, increase the amount of it, and don't forget about the time bonus. It's especially hard to beat when you are playing the game for the first time, because pre-call signs for speed limits are non-existent in the game, and when you have this sign that warns you about the 20 km or even more speed restriction difference, it can be uncomfortable when you try to slow down from 80 to 40 or 30 with a heavy freight train, and right now it's the only train type you can haul. And what happens when you are overspeeding through a junction or a curve? Well, I guess you get it, because it's in the game's name. You are going to get derailed, and that's where the issue begins. If you derail a train, you have to fix your entire train, and sometimes you have to pay for the environmental damage, which can lead to a complete bankruptcy. It's an issue because when you can't pay a huge amount of fee, then you are not going to be able to take other jobs, and this cycle begins, and the only way to get out of this is to restart the game. Also, don't forget to mention the scenery, which is very nice, and if you can get the graphics and render distance to a higher level, It makes your ride more amusing. However, don't be surprised if the graphics of the game is not like an Unreal Engine 5 showcase render. Also, multiplayer is available with mods, but I don't recommend using it because it creates so many bugs that it just makes the gameplay experience more frustrating. And you can give it a try if you want, and if you have friends who plays with the game, but don't expect too much from it. To sum up, for you as a newbie, I can recommend being careful with speed, and at first just try to remember the speed limit on the map, and after that you can try to beat the time bonus, meanwhile enjoying the scenery. And for someone who's not into high-speed trains or just wants to have a real shunting or short-distance freight train experience, it's the best game to pick. It's only €40 and it supports VR. Also, more content is expected to this year, like electrification and electric locomotive. So, the next title, which is a bit complicated to be honest, is Train Simulator 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and Classic, and even more other titles. So it's just Train Simulator Classic right now. Starting with Train Simulator Classic can be a bit complicated, and why? Because it has some default content which change from time to time. It depends on which Train Simulator 2000 and any year you bought, but usually this content were DLCs before it became the certain year's default content, like the Band for Train Simulator 2017, for example. And technically the game doesn't have any default content. Yes, that means when you bought the game, technically you just bought the certain year's bundle and the game's engine, as the Train Simulator 2012, 13, 14, 17, anything. And if you had the previous episode but didn't buy the next one, you got the updates for your game engines anyway. Right now it's Train Simulator Classic, and now the default content you get for the game doesn't change as I know, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. The other thing that makes this title a bit complicated how to recommend or for what level is because it has a huge variety of DLCs. Some of them are not even available on Steam, because yes, you can get DLCs from third-party sites like the RSSLO or Railworks Austria. The advantage of this is that this game has content from almost everywhere around the globe, and you can play with almost any locomotive from around the world. You want to play some American freight train? It got you. You want to play some high-speed train in Europe? Well, we have high-speed lines from almost everywhere. You want to play a certain locomotive in the game? Guess what? There is a 75 or even higher chance that you can find it for the game. The downside of this is that almost all of them cost money, and the other thing is that the quality and details are not at the same level. Let's mention the TS Pro category of the DLCs that takes the experience in the game to a higher level. Most of these TS Pro DLCs requires a proper real-life like startups, and you can just skip these steps because you want an already running locomotive when the scenario's first task is to start up the locomotive. And then you have the average DLCs, and the quality of these can vary a lot. Some of them give you the same impression as TS Pro DLCs do, and some of them are just about to put the reverser to forward, release the brakes, give throttle, and there you go. You have a moving train and then just complete the scenario. Speaking of scenarios, you get scenarios for certain locomotives on certain maps. By this, the game can feel very repetitive, as you can't change the time, you can't change the scenario, you have to use the editor to change the loco state or even the whole locomotive. Also note that there are some locomotives which have several examples with different quality, like the ÖBB 1144. It takes an example made by Skyhook Games, which is, in my opinion, a very good TS Pro DLC, and also another one made by the RSSLO, so be aware who made the certain DLC you want to buy. You can play Quick Drive, but most of the time, the maps are not prepared properly for this game mode, and you have to stop only at the last station, and the virtual dispatcher gives you the highest priority, even if you are just a freight train, so it doesn't create an authentic experience of train driving. The other downside of the game is that you are tied to a certain view, so can't just walk around like in the Real Valley, although you have free cam, but except taking some cool screenshots, it doesn't have any other function. Learning how to drive a train depends on which DLC did you buy and how proper the manual is that you got for the content you bought. Most of the time these manuals are very useful on European routes, but sometimes they are very oversimplified and expects you to have the knowledge for the signaling from previous routes. Sometimes the experience can be uplifting how detailed a locomotive or a map is, but sometimes it can be a sad experience that your favorite locomotive or your favorite line you wanted to drive on is not representing the quality you were expecting, especially when the price tag is not representing the quality. Physics are good here, but it depends on the content you have, so this is why it's hard to determine the overall score of the game when it's about graphics or physics or the gameplay or realism. You can play multiplayer, but if you can find a good map with a good train set and a fair amount of scenario for this combo, then you are good to go with this title. If you don't mind that the graphics are not that great, scenarios can be different on each map and with each locomotive, but most of the time it's just get the train from one side of the map to the other, meanwhile you have to stop at certain stations. Most of the time the train influence systems and deadman switches are functional, you just have to turn them on with the right key combination and you are good to go, and have a kinda realistic experience with this game. For the next title, we have the chaotic sequel, I guess, which is the Train Sim World 5, 6... I don't count, there is no sense to do it, trust me. So, both Train Simulator Classic and Train Sim World series are being developed by Dovetail Games. They have certain kind of reputation among Train Simulator and Train Sim World users. It can be different based on which game do these people prefer, and it's not the best, trust me. For this game, I could say it feels like Train Simulator 2 with all the features I've been missing from Train Simulator Classic series. Pre-walk, you can get into the engine room sometimes and flip the switches of the train influence system, which is also turned off by default in this game, and then walk around the train, and a bit better acceleration, traction, suspension, and braking simulation. The game runs on Unreal Engine 4. However, compared to other simulator games running on this absolutely not designed for this task engine, the physics and the performance is quite good, but on an absolute level, it's not always the best. However, it runs better on my computer than the Train Simulator Classic, but it can depend on your hardware, which one do you prefer. The gameplay is almost the same in Train Sim World series as in Train Simulator Classic, but you have way more scenarios. Kinda. So, you bought the game, and you kinda see the same model for scenarios as in Train Simulator Classic, but there is another way to enjoy your freshly bought overpriced locomotive DLC on a freshly bought overpriced map DLC, if those two doesn't come together, and it's being called the timetable mode. So, this mode lets you to play on map at almost any time. It recreates a real timetable from certain year, and you can pick your locomotive and then the available map, and the available services are being listed for the certain locomotive you have picked. It can be anything. You pick the Siemens Taurus, well, you can drive the freight trains on certain maps, or you can drive Eurocity or Intercity services. You want to drive some regional express or interregional train? Just pick a loco that's being used on these trains, and you are good to go. However, some of these new locomotives ends up as only freight locos on older maps, and it can be a bit frustrating when you got only 5 or 6 passenger services for a certain locomotive, like the Siemens Vectron, which is only available on the Frankfurt-Fulda map as a passenger train, and it's also a separate DLC you have to buy. Also, maps paired with certain locomotives restricts the locomotive's performance, and you can't use the true potential of it, like the BR-103 and the Lenkerei-Strecke, where you can't use the 200 km top speed of the locomotive. Brake simulation got better than in Train Simulator Classic, but simulation in the game can be buggy, like the PZB, which sometimes gives you penalty brake for no reason. Then turns out you had to acknowledge a signal that you didn't have to in Train Simulator Classic before on any map, and I don't think you have to even in real life. For content, it's not as much in Train Simulator Classic, but it's a newer title, so I don't mind, but you get a fair amount of DLCs anyway. However, the amount of high-quality DLCs is not that much, and usually the content from United Kingdom enjoys a better quality than the German ones. DLCs made by other than DTG usually ends up in a higher quality, with some exceptions, but DLCs from Train Sim Germany usually represents a very close to real-life experience, like the DBBR 101 Expert DLC and the upcoming DBBR 145 DLC with proper fault simulation, virtual conductor that I really want to see in TSWS default content, and Train Sim Germany is also making the BR145 Expert DLC currently, so it's not out yet, with even more features, so I can't wait to see it in game and try it myself. Also, let's not forget about Vector Simulation's Liberec DLC from Czechia, which I can assume is going to be the good quality DLC, and I think probably is going to be the Niedertalban of Czechia, or even better. Also, this is going to be the first DLC that is not from the usual countries, so I'm looking for it. For mods, you have some sound mod for locos, timetable mods for maps, repaints, or some kind of reworks that takes the locomotive's quality to a higher or similar level as the BR101, and mods that allows you to use more locomotives for certain services. Also, you can have a proper Ibula on your second monitor while playing the game, so even if DTG refuses to make this feature in-game, modders still found a way to make it work, which is a very nice touch. Downside of the game is that Dovetail Games are giving us DLCs and contents being more effortless recently. We get new titles every year, except nothing major comes with these titles. Of course, the station announcement with TSW6 was a nice touch, but most of the time these features get implemented in the new content only, so be aware that some features will lack in the older contents. Also, mods can break when new title gets released, so be aware of that. Also, the other downside of the game is that TSW got a roadmap back then, and multiplayer was being promised, and I think it was because of the next title I'm going to mention. But, well, they confirmed recently that there is not going to be any multiplayer in the game. Also, another side note, this game's next episodes gets released every year, and by the time they release it, since TSW4, you can claim it for free for 4 or 5 weeks, but you only get the game's engine and the default content, because yes, it has default content, but it's not as interesting as other ones. It's just the training center with an oval track layout, and you can drive 3 to 4 locomotives on that, and that's it. In the end, if you want a little bit better experience than Train Simulator Classic, I can recommend you this game, but be aware of the price tags, just like in Train Simulator Classic. If you want a multiplayer option, well, I can recommend you SimRail. So, amongst these games in this video, technically this is the newest one if you don't count every and almost exactly same episode of the SW series being released every year. The game's biggest promise was a realistic, properly working multiplayer, and oh boy, it works very well. Most of the time. With SimRail, you can taste how does it feel like to drive a real train with real people on other trains, or even as a dispatcher, because yes, you can be a dispatcher in multiplayer, and you can ask a station in voice chat to let you through, and sometimes they can refuse as they have other trains to deal with at the same time. For graphics, it's not the best looking one, but the lighting feels the best in this game, or at least it is, in my opinion. For physics, it's almost the most realistic game. However, there is still a thing or two to polish, so it can be as real life, and you can get an authentic experience of train driving. Brakes have proper reaction time in the carriages, which depends on how far away from the locomotive inside the train set, except if you have EP brakes, which makes the brakes reaction time so fast that it feels like you are driving a multiple unit. There is literally no inoperative switch in trains. Switches you want to flip, any buttons you want to push has a function, and it does the function. Speaking of polish, the base content and the DLCs with some exceptions, or at least one exception, and I think it's the only one, are from Poland. You get a huge map, several vehicles for base content only, and the best part is, you can see other trains, even if you don't own them. The other feature I'm missing from TSW is the map connections. You can change, or kinda change maps without loading a new map, or teleporting somewhere else, because new content is being attached to the default map, and as you run through maps without having to reload, or reload the game, you are just running through smoothly in multiplayer. Only downside is that because of that, some trains will be unavailable, and it can be because of cars too. So if you own the map, own the locomotive, which is from another DLC, and not from the freight DLC like the České dráhy 163 Pershing, but the train uses cars from the freight DLC, then the train is unavailable for you, sadly. Also, the same for the trains that runs on these maps, but goes to different line or section of the map that requires DLC, then it's going to be unavailable too. For the dispatcher side, I haven't tried it yet, but as a train driver, I can confirm that it increases the fun level when one of your friends is sitting on a station and you and your friends group passes by there, or even better, more people takes different stations next to each other, so you can mess with the traffic control with your friends driving the trains, or dispatch trains with more or less sense than AI would do. You can send your friends on left track to the next station to overtake someone, or just for fun if the other friend or the AI agrees on that. Also, you can track your friends and other trains driven by other people or bots on an online map, and you can see if the station you want to pick as a dispatcher is free or not without starting the game. And the same goes for trains too. For train drivers, we usually greet each other by horning the hell out of the train, and usually we flash beams. That's true for greeting another train driver, the dispatcher at the station. Also, speaking of beams, please use the light dimmer, especially trains with LED lights. It's really annoying and it hurts others' eyes when it's night in the game, you sit in a bit darker room and then suddenly a white glowing ball passes by in the opposite direction, so thank you. For content, you get several vehicles that includes the iconic EP or EU07 or 08. It's the oldest locomotive in the game, also the most iconic locomotive of Poland, which is being used in the game for almost everything. Yes, for even intercity services or even for freight trains, for almost everything except the high-speed trains. You get the Trox 2.5, and I call it like that because the dashboard is very similar to the Trox 3's dashboard, meanwhile it's just a Trox 2. You get the Nevak Dragon, made for freight trains, so with this locomotive you can drive only freight trains in the game. For multiple units we have several ones. You can drive the iconic EN57 or EN71, also known as Kibel. Driving this EMU is very unique experience because of the electrical system it has and the strange driving style it requires. For more modern commuters, you can pick the PESA ELF 1, which has also two variant 4 and the 2 section 1. Both of them can be found on different places of the map. For high-speed trains, you can get the Alstom Pendolino, which is a very nice one. It has ETCS, it has cruise control, and I think that's all. For the map, you have a huge map by default, and you can drive between Warsaw and Krakow or Katowice. Also, you can drive between Krakow and Szenziso, I hope I pronounce it correctly, or between these stations being mentioned earlier. It takes at least 2 hours to drive to the other side of the map, and trust me, on the main line, the speed is not low. For DLCs, currently I can count on one hand how many DLCs the game has. However, the new Impulse 2 DLC requires the new Woods Junction DLC if you want to drive it in multiplayer. Also, the other downside of this new Impulse 2 DLC is that you can use it properly as an Impulse 2 only in single player. In multiplayer, it replaces other trains currently, and it's usually some kibels, so your allowed speed is not more than 110 most of the time, and if not, it's just 120 and it's not 160. For ETCS simulation, I'm surprised how accurate it is, and everything is functional on the display. You can change the train data, the level, everything. DLC contents are very unique and very detailed, although you can enjoy the base content at almost the same level. For trains, my personal favorite is the České dráhy 163 Pershing. However, I'm sad that we don't have more passenger service with that. Most of the time it hauls freight trains, but occasionally you can find good passenger services too. You just have to be patient and take them in time while playing multiplayer sessions. Downside of the game is the low amount of single-player scenarios, and sometimes it's more enjoyable to drive in single-player than in multiplayer. Okay, let me explain why. So, with all the joy of playing with your friends, there is nothing special happening on servers except the AI messing up the dispatching on stations where players haven't joined to control the traffic. But in single-player, you have some kind of events which gives you a surprise if you play it for the first time and creates an authentic experience. Speaking of single player and scenarios, you can pick your favorite locomotive or train on every scenario. Similar to timetable mode in TSW, but with the few scenarios. You can pick what state you want to get your trains, like already running, cold and dark, and how much time you need to boot it up. However, this is not true for multiplayer. In multiplayer, every train is spawning on schedule with certain locomotives and certain train sets, so you can choose what locomotive you want to drive when picking a train. But you can filter the available types and then pick the service that is the most fitting for you. Also, another annoying thing about multiplayer is the server restarts. When you could find your favorite locomotive, a good service, you load the game, plays for less than 5 minutes and then server restart. AI messes with traffic sometimes and makes absolutely nonsense decisions, but that's not a huge deal, except when you have to wait for more than 10 minutes, because it gives a higher priority to another train for no reason. Overall, the physics are way better than in TSW, and especially better than in Train Simulator Classic. The price of the game is kinda regular, it's only 40 euros, but the DLCs are way cheaper than in TSW and in Train Simulator Classic, and you get way better quality, trust me. If you are a beginner but looking for a game that is very realistic, I can't recommend a better title for starting with than SimRail. Probably this is the title I can recommend the most, so you can have a proper experience of train driving, but having some assist on at the same time if needed. And if you want the hardcore experience, I can recommend Machina. If you feel like SimRail or any titles being mentioned in this video is not hardcore enough, then you have another title that is being the oldest one amongst these games. Somehow it went through so much overhaul that it slightly feels a bit younger game than actually it is. So this title is, as I mentioned, Machina. It's also another police simulator, but it got released in 2001, and I had to realize that this game is technically older than me. And if you are looking for a true real-life hardcore experience, then I can't recommend a better title than this. In Machina, you have head-up display, but only to know where the stations are being placed around the map, but you don't have anything else. You don't see the distance for the next station, you have to look at the distance signs around the tracks where you are, and where the station is, so you can determine the distance between you and the next station you have to stop. You have heads-up display in Machina, but only to know where the stations are being placed around the map, but you don't have anything else. You don't see the distance for the next station, so you have to look at the distance signs around the tracks where you are, or where the stations are being placed, so you can determine the distance between you and the next station you have to stop. Also, the physics of the game really compromises the graphics, and if you want to know how does it feel to drive a train, I can't recommend this title enough. You have to shunt in the beginning of the scenarios sometimes, and also at the end of it. Some scenarios are not repetitive because it has some random events like signal is falling back or signal failure or trains not coming on time exactly in the same scenario. You are being taken to another track at station and etc. Some of the older scenarios can get buggy sometimes, but you can have your time in this game, and you can get it how stressful it gets when driving a train, and you have to stop right in time, meanwhile keeping in mind so many things like the distance of the stations, where are the stations, the signals, everything. There are no assists for driving, except the game sometimes gives you advice how to power up or completely shut down the loco, and also gives you advice what to do when completing a scenario, like couple a train together, uncouple some carriages, or even the whole train. Speaking of locomotive, let's dive into content. You get several locomotives, multiple units, carriages, coaches. For maps, sadly you get only fictional maps. Even if you see a real city's name, it's out of the map all the time, and sometimes you have the same map with extensions as new maps. Sometimes you have different maps with the same name, but that's not a huge issue in my opinion. For example, is the Chalkovo and Chalkovo V2. After mentioning prices in previous titles, you might ask, how much does it cost then? Well, nothing. Yes, you heard me right. Nothing. After 25 years, the game got released on Steam and it's still free, so you can get it anytime as you wish, and you have so much content in the game that you wouldn't expect that from a free game. Also, some of these contents are not finished properly, like no proper cockpit, and some of them are still in work in progress, but still you have enough content, and I'm sure you can find a scenario for yourself. Also, speaking of scenarios, you can change the locomotive or an entire train if you want. You want to drive a Polregio EP07 with some carriages instead of an Impulse one? Sure. You want to drive a multiple unit instead of old carriages on a non-electrified line? You can do it. Downside of the game is that it's very old and loading time takes long. New locos like the Vectron can feel off because the game is designed for older locomotives, so if you want proper experience, just take something older like the EP07 or the EP09 or the well-known EN57 or the 71. Also, some descriptions are Polish only, so you have to use translator to understand what to do to complete a scenario, and sometimes you get stuck even after you read the description and translated it. It can be frustrating not knowing what to do when the game doesn't behave as it should when you had done everything properly by the translation, So it's a good thing being aware of that. Overall, this is the most realistic title you can pick currently, but if you don't mind not having that much content and want to play less overwhelming game, then I recommend picking Simrail, where you can play with your friends, but if you want a proper experience, I can't recommend this title enough. So, by the end of this video, there are other titles out there I know, but I have played with only these titles, and I tried to pick the more authentic titles for proper train simulator games. So hope you like this video, and if I missed out something or missed a title you wanted to see in this video, then just let me know in the comment section, and if you like this video, just please like and subscribe. Thank you.